This one's going to be a little bit different than previous ones because it's going to be talking a lot about kind of like my experiences of what I've seen with people, what they struggle with, etc. And it's going to be about like how to learn what like things you're probably doing pretty consistently in the game incorrectly and what you should be doing instead and how to improve on that. So basically, it's going to be kind of like a masterclass of keys to improving, and we're going to have like stages of the game. So we'll just go by each of the stages, just depending on how much time it consumes. And I'll be like kind of polling you guys, asking you questions like what are things that you think are mistakes by people in the early stages, and then we'll be talking about it. And then I'll be showing like a bunch of things in the practice tool. If there are like any questions about like champion specific things too, we'll be talking about that also. So it's going to be kind of like an overarching thing of like stages of the game is a probably a good way to do it. You know, what are you probably doing wrong at stages of the game that are causing you to lose games in that sense.
Warning, warning, warning.
So yeah, we'll just jump right into it then. So first off, what we're gonna be talking about at the start is obviously the early game. You know, your laning phase. You can recreate this pretty much all the time, but there's a lot of like pretty consistent problems that I see with people when I do like a lot of coaching stuff. For laning phase oriented things. So what I would ask you guys, you can post either in general chat or you can just say, what do you think are like common mistakes that we see in the laning phase? It can be champion specific if you want it to be, but it also can be overarching like commonality things that we see in laning phases that are problematic.
Pushing the wave under tower level 2.
So do you think that is a mistake in that sense?
For the most part.
Okay.
You lose a lot of CS because you're afraid to be up. You're afraid you're going to get level 3 ganked.
Oh, so are you saying like you're pushing the wave and you get it under the turret at level 2?
I found that I do that a lot. I like doing like what's the relic shield?
Uh-huh.
Just collecting minions and not thinking about what I'm doing.
I would say that like most of the time this is actually not really true. Usually like you do want to have level 2 before somebody, like regardless of your lane matchups, and if you push the wave into the turret and you're concerned about being dove, that's actually perfect because then the wave will bounce back and start pushing back to you. So you can just collect EXP at max range and just let the wave push into you. So maybe what the problem that you're having with this is kind of what you do afterwards. If you're scared of being ganked, you can let it push into you. Don't contest the wave, right? So like for example, when you push a wave in, so let's say you pushed in 2 of these waves and you're the blue. We'll just, for the sake of conversation, you'll be the blue side, right? The way waves work is they always walk into the middle, right? Because they'll meet in the middle. They run at the same rate or whatever. So if you push 2 waves in here and then their wave comes, it should get stuck here, which means that they'll get the next wave will get here faster for them than it will for you, which will cause it to push out to you, and you should be able to catch like EXP at least. So maybe one of the mistakes also is that when you push for level 2, you're using your ward in bad spots. I do actually see this pretty commonly, which is just like, you know, you're sitting in the middle of the lane, you're fighting for the wave or whatever, and someone takes the brush. And sometimes people will just give their ward immediately to the brush. And that might be one of the reoccurring problems that you actually have where you're warding this brush when actually what you should be doing is let's just say you're playing a melee champion because you said relic stacks and stuff. If you push the wave all the way to the turret, then what your mistake probably is this, which is warding the noob brush. So a lot of people actually ward this noob brush. And the reason why I call it the noob brush is just because it doesn't actually really see anything. So if the jungler comes and ganks you, you're not going to see the jungler till basically right here, right where the outline is. And so a lot of times what'll happen is you'll be all the way pushed up to the turret, and then he'll come and gank you, and even when you're running away, he'll be able to catch up to you and kill you. So maybe what you're struggling with is you need to be getting deeper wards down. So rather than getting a ward in the noob brush, what you need to be doing is walking out further, getting a ward like here, or a ward here, or maybe even checking if their blue is down, which is actually a pretty common problem that a lot of people definitely have, which is we want to make sure that our ward is far out. so we can see jungle a lot earlier. The earlier you just get vision for people, the way better off you are in most circumstances. So anytime that you are pushing for level 2, you should definitely be doing this, by the way. As like any support, we always want to hit level 2 before us. But we need to maybe what you need to do is make sure that you convert it into value, which is getting a ward down so you can see where the jungler is pathing to, or like going to potentially gank to you. And also, maybe if you are concerned about getting ganked in the early stages, you know, the enemy jungler doesn't leash, and so, or your bot lane doesn't leash, so you know that the jungler is going to be down there, then you just kind of need to let the wave push out towards you and not fight for the wave after the level 2 and the bounce. That's kind of what we're looking for in most cases. Are there any other mistakes that you feel like occur quite frequently in laning phase?
Not really sure, like, if I'm making mistakes.
Okay, cool. Then that's what this is going to be for. It's going to be helping you with being able to identify if you are actually making mistakes or not. So I'm going to pull up, basically what I've got written down here, kind of in chronological order. So do you have something that you want to share on top of that, like mistakes that you feel like commonly happen in the laning phase?
Yeah, sure. What I've noticed is especially when I'm playing a ranged support and I'm making my opponent's ADC work really hard for CS. So every time they woke up, I try to auto attack them. And also I noticed that when I'm slacking off mentally, that I'm not doing that, and I also see my opponents oftentimes not do that. Same goes for engage supports. Every time they woke up or CSing, I make them scared, or try to make them scared for engage.
Okay.
And oftentimes I forget about it.
Okay, so just like being more engaged in the lane, right? Paying attention to your minion health, paying attention to paying attention to the minion health, paying attention to all that stuff. So here, we're gonna do like a chronological order basically of breaking down like the stages of laning phase and mistakes that I commonly see in all of my coaching lessons that I have been doing pretty frequently. So this will help you basically have a good format for identifying if you are making mistakes like pretty early on throughout the entire laning phase. So you can kind of see I wrote like a lot of stuff down, especially for the laning phase stuff. So we'll be tackling that first. If you have questions or you think of stuff too that I might have missed, then we can add it to the list. But this is mostly just so that you have like almost like a learning path where, okay, I now know, am I doing this? Cool. Am I doing this? Cool. Like we want to move, you kind of want to move through this like a checklist. If you are not doing this in your laning phase, then usually what's probably going on is you're not being efficient with your laning phase. So this will just be like the laning phase of like 1 to 10 minutes or so that I commonly see by people. Most common one, especially if you're playing a ranged champion, is the most important one. This is the rule of thumb for laning. If you are not hitting a player, you should always be hitting a minion. We want to make sure that we get level 2 ASAP. The reason for this is if you're auto-attacking the minions and your opponent is not, then you will always guarantee yourself the push first. And by hitting level 2 first, you get to dictate what's going on. So even if for whatever reason you crash it, you're concerned about it getting ganked or whatever, then you need to make sure that you're just retooling yourself to do the next stage of it, which is getting a ward down, right? We want to make sure that we can keep track of the jungle, where he's coming from, etc. So in cases where you're maybe concerned about getting ganked, maybe you don't leash, they don't leash, so both junglers are maybe going to run down to bottom lane. We want to make sure that you're just running over here and getting a ward down. Next is being in position to actually punish level 2. So I see this actually as one of the most common problems that a lot of people have when it comes to laning. So a lot of times most people will tell me, oh, it's the first full wave plus 3 melees to hit level 2, right? But the thing that actually happens though is a lot of times they'll kill the minion, then they'll start walking forward, which means that they don't get to create an opportunity to actually force with their level 2 advantage. So whenever you do this part, which is really important, so you're hitting the minions, you're guaranteeing your push, etc., you have a minion wave advantage. Then what happens is we want to convert that advantage into something, which is going to be our level 2 fighting. Most people aren't very attentive to people getting close to level 2, so that's why you need to be, I call it like pre-moving. You're moving up preemptively when, your last minion or two is about to die, and that will create an opportunity where you hit level 2 while you're fighting them, and then you'll be able to actually force on them. This is really great for both melees and ranged champions. Obviously, you can't apply this element when you are a melee champion. But for getting level 2 push, the most important thing for melee champions in particular is this right here, which is you want to use your relic stacks on the second wave for melees, not the first wave. I see this pretty commonly where, you walk to lane after you've leashed, there's, 2 or 3 melees at like 50% HP. So I see a lot of people walk up and just dump their relics into it. This is a big no-no, because your relics are actually great execute tools for pushing the lane and getting a huge advantage in terms of, being able to hit level 2 before them. But the way you leverage it is you have to use your relic stacks on the second wave, on the melees. If you don't do this, then you usually won't hit level 2 before somebody. There are, of course, exceptions to the rules where, you get pushed in too hard, you can't actually access the second wave for the relics. But in any case where you can, we want to make sure that we're exercising this. This is a huge thing that a lot of people end up missing out on, and it actually ruins a lot of their wave control, and it doesn't allow them to hit level 2. So whenever you're playing those melee champions, make sure we're using our relic stacks on the second wave. If you don't use it there, you'll run into a bunch of problems where you're just not getting the push going. This also allows you to then be in this scenario, right, where there's 3 melees, you dump your relic, usually preferably on the first 2. The third melee is about to die, and then we want to be in a position to actually, skill up our ability on a melee champion and then go in, create pressure, get summoners, etc. This is actually one of the easiest ways to win lane, right here, is these 3 things right here. So we want to make sure that we are making a good habit of it. If you are not consistently getting the push level 2, and you are consistently not, using your level 2 to create pressure, this is already the first problem that you're running into when it comes to laning phase. Because you should actually be able to recreate this pretty frequently, because I can tell you right now that most people between silver and platinum, they don't do this. They don't do any of this. So you won't be actually contested, and you'll usually actually get level 2 first. Any questions or anything like that?
Yeah, sure. Also, if you're not in a position to get level 2 first, maybe you should ping your ADC off and such. I've noticed that very often they don't realize that they are at a level disadvantage, and they just keep last hitting, and then they get all in and died.
No, yeah, that's perfect. Yeah, for sure. So actually we can add 2 pieces to it. If you're getting pushed in, then scoot back early. Don't give them the level 2 and trade advantage. So you can also communicate this with pings for ADC. So like if for whatever reason, maybe you're playing like Leona, bad level 1 champion, right? You're against 2 ranged champions and they're getting the push first. Make sure that you're giving up, you're not fighting for the wave or not in the wave when you're getting pushed in. Because we want to make sure that you're not getting level 2 advantage, right? We want to make sure you're not giving them this exact scenario where they can create pressure on you. Because that happens sometimes, you can't always get the push. Most of the time you should be able to if you're applying these kinds of things, but if you're a melee versus a range, you have weak level 1, etc., then this is honestly a really, really important thing to exercise. On top of that, by the way, one thing that I'd see pretty frequently is this phenomenon where you get pushed in, right? And one of the things that happens when you get pushed in is the enemy support a lot of times will take this brush. So one thing that is really important is for whatever reason, if you can't get pressure, you're getting pushed in, etc. right here, you're getting pushed in, you're scooting back, etc. Make sure that you're dropping your ward in, whatever brush is like on your side or whatever, early. That way you don't have to go and face check it later on after the wave resets to get a ward in here. Because that means that you're going to usually get poked, hit with spells, etc. And we want to avoid that as much as possible. So this is like a preemptive move to make sure that as you're backing off, you ward your closest brush to your turret. So you don't have to face check later to get vision there. And actually one thing, Foot tackled on, which is a really, really important thing just in general for laning phase, is ping on your way whenever you want to go for trades. This is particularly important for the level 2 all-in, right? You're going to hit level 2 before them, so I usually ping on my way like pretty frequently so that my AD carry starts moving up while he's last hitting the minions, and we can fight. Because, obviously we want 2 people to be hitting them rather than 1 person. But in general, it's really, really important for you anytime you want to play aggressively that you're pinging on your way when you want to go for these trades. Poking in the wave, maybe looking for an all-in, etc. If you aren't doing this, then the AD carry a lot of times won't follow you. And that will cause you to be very frustrated and tilt very easily. So we want to make sure we're actively avoiding that. So your main tool when it comes to actually just playing League of Legends in general, but especially for your laning phase stuff, is pinging. We want to make sure ping on your way. Ping, I usually a lot of times will ping like the minions that are low, ping on my way, etc. And that will allow me to create pressure in the lane and look for kills or, just get harass off where my AD carry is backing me up.
What I want to add to is what I've noticed. Maybe it's a lower elo thing. That oftentimes the ADC doesn't follow up when you're flash engaging on an engage support. So I started pinging my flash and then pinging an opponent.
Mm-hmm.
Make it very clear what I'm about to do.
Yeah, perfect.
I think it works.
Yeah, definitely. Most people can't. Think of it from the perspective of the AD carry. He plays with a different support every time. They play different champions, different styles, etc. It's hard to sync up. So, use the tools available to you to sync up as easily as possible. And trust me, it will do a world of better for you. So if you don't exercise pings at all, it's time to start learning. Even if you're just doing the baby steps of pinging on your way when you're about to hit level 2 and, pinging on your way when you're trading. Because if you don't develop these skills, then you're going to have trouble syncing up with your AD carry a lot of times, and there's going to be a lot of frustrating moments where you're doing something and they're doing another thing. That's kind of like the first 2 minutes of a laning phase. So if you're not exercising, one of these two modes, scooting back, making sure we're not getting poked, or pushing forward and getting value out of our push, then there's probably problems that are going on in quite literally your first 3 waves. So that's definitely the main focus point of how to identify, some of the problems that you're probably having in your first couple of waves. Next is a common thing that I see quite done poorly is auto-attacking. Auto-attacking actually does quite literally as much damage as a spell, so especially in the early stages. So it's pretty common for a spell to do between like 60 to 80 damage, and auto-attacks do about 50 damage when it comes to your support champion. So I did a lot of people, I see this pretty commonly with like Nami, Lulu, even Zyra to a lesser extent. I see it with like a lot of range supports, where we want to make sure that you're auto-attacking in your trades, because it just adds so much extra damage. So, when you're going for a Nami trade and you walk up, you want to auto, get that extra damage in, because just right there, that combo that I just explained is going to do 2 times the damage of you just even walking up and using W and running away. Plus, this is a great way for you to build a good mechanical skill where you're generating income, right? So a lot of like range champions especially will be trying to generate a lot of gold income, and we want to make sure that you are making the max amount of gold as possible. Auto attacks actually proc your spell thief, so we want to make sure we're doing that. So on the side of tanks, make sure you are paying attention to cannons. Cannons are basically the most important resource for you. I see a lot of people just randomly proc their relics a lot of the times just in lane, kind of like in an autopilot-y sense. If you didn't know, so cannons spawn every 3 waves, so 1 minute 30 seconds. So make sure that you are always checking for if the cannon is coming on the next wave, so that you have a relic stack up. Because a lot of people, I see them, they will autopilot, they'll just proc relics over and over again, and then their relic won't be up for the cannon. Or maybe they're just like not in a position to get the cannon. So because of this, it just depletes your quest a lot of the time. So we want to make sure that we are always getting those cannons. Cannons spawn every 3 waves, so we want to make sure we're doing this. To tie this into too, if you find times to roam, make sure you grab some minions before leaving. I can't tell you enough how often I see this where someone playing a relic using champion will roam, look for a play, maybe they get it off, maybe they don't, not really the important part. But what really matters is if you do find times to roam, make sure you're cycling your relic. Your relic actually stacks up pretty dang fast nowadays, since the reduced cooldown. So it's really important that you're walking in the lane, getting that, taxing your teammate a little bit, getting that EXP and that gold. That way you're still pushing to the quest. because I see this actually pretty often where a lot of people, you'll roam mid at level 3, level 4, etc. Maybe you just have like a good timing or something like that, and they just don't get the relics, and then all of a sudden their quest is done at like 14-15 minutes, and that's just pretty much just not ideal. If we're actually looking for our quest line goals, it's probably 8 minutes for Spell Thieves and 10 to 11 minutes for Relic. If we're looking for kind of our golden numbers, obviously you can get them way faster than that, but you should pretty much be shooting for these kinds of numbers every time when it comes to your quest. If you're not getting your quest done pretty much on these kind of timers consistently, obviously there's every so often there's a game where maybe you can't quite get it there, which is fine. It's not that big of a deal, but on average we should be looking for these numbers for the Relic and the Spell Thieves. If for whatever reason you're not hitting these numbers, then you probably need to start working on doing the things right above, which is auto-attacking in your trades, making sure you're getting your Spell Thief stacks, and tanks, make sure you're paying attention to cannons and getting those cannon spawns every time. And then if you find times to roam, make sure you are grabbing minions before you leave. If you're not doing this, you're probably falling behind on your quest too frequently. This is the difference between, an extra item, a whole nother cycle of warding that is really, really important for the mid game. So if you are not doing this, then you are struggling in this game, and we need to make sure that you are actively working on that. Sometimes a lot of my best piece of advice for Spell Thieves is really just making sure that outside of auto attacking and looking for trades, etc., is hitting the turret, which we will actually be going over in just a minute. Next thing is maintaining control of brushes. A lot of people have a tendency to kind of walk around in the laning phase. I see this pretty often whenever I'm watching people, where no one's in a brush and the support is kind of just doing this over and over again. If you have nothing to do, make sure we're taking those brushes. The reason why brush control is really important is, number one, it stops them from taking the brushes so that they can't harass you from the brushes. And number two, it's also great for you to engage. So as a range support, it allows you to throw your skill shots at people from Fog of War really well. It allows you to create a lot of pressure. So, those Zyra roots, Morgana bindings, Thresh hooks, etc. Really powerful in that sense. And then if you're a melee champion, the way you leverage it is you have Hextech Flash. So hopefully, you're playing a support, you're playing a tank, Alistar, Leona, etc. And you can either flash or Hextech Flash from the brush and look for engages pretty easily. So we want to make sure that we are always taking control of the brushes. This way we can throw skill shots from them, prevent enemies from taking it, and can use Hextech Flash from brush. So these are all like great ways and opportunities to level up your brush control in a lot of ways. Throwing skill shots from them, preventing enemies from taking it, and using our Hextech Flash. If you're not doing pretty much any of these things, you're not really making great opportunity of your brush control. So we definitely need to make sure that you are actively doing this. Otherwise, you will have trouble with leveraging your brush control into something that's meaningful. Next is going to just be pushing waves in fully. So a pretty common thing that a lot of people tend to struggle with is they don't know when they're supposed to push and when they're supposed to, not hit the wave, or like what they're supposed to do, etc. So we'll give you a couple examples of this. If the wave is in the middle of the lane and no one is here, so we're going to use the option of no one is here right now, just so you know how to like push waves in and take resets. So if the wave is in the middle, if you have any level of AoE damage at all, then you can push that wave as the second it starts coming in, and you only need to do one wave. So you just need one wave for when it's in the middle. But here is where things start getting tricky. So if you get pushed into the turret, right, and your next wave comes out and it gets stuck here, then no matter what, you will actually need two waves for this, 100%, and you need to push really, really hard. If you don't do that, then you actually will have the wave stuck here after the first wave, and you will find yourself in a really sad moment. So make sure that whenever you are doing this, you fully push waves. Anytime that players take resets, you force them out of the lane, they're low on HP, they can't fight for the wave, etc. You want to take your reset. We want to make sure that we're understanding how many waves it takes. So in the middle, it's one wave. If it's on your side, it's two waves. And then obviously it's only one wave if it's all the way over here. And these are kind of like the 3 areas that you usually get stuck with when it comes to wave control. So we want to make sure that we're always pushing in these waves. It's a pretty common thing that I see very often where supports need to help. So the way you help, by the way, when it comes to pushing waves is obviously relics on the melees is a very easy one. But if you have no relics or you're just range support, etc., use AoE at the start, you know, once they clump up. Because one of the problems that we run into is we don't want our ADC to miss CS while we push, right? We don't want to mess up CS. We don't want them to miss a lot of CS, etc. So what we want to do is we want to do damage to things when they're full HP. So a lot of times if you see me like when I play Zyra, right, the wave will start coming in. I'll like line it up and just use my snare immediately at the start. This is just to do the damage immediately so that my AD carry can kind of pick when he's going to go for last hits. Because we want to make sure that our AD carry is not missing last hits. This is the main problem that we want to actively avoid. Another thing you can do is just hit the ranged minions. The reason why just hitting the ranged minions is really helpful too is because ranged minions aren't taking damage. So you know how like a wave will run into itself right here in the bottom lane, and you'll kind of have like here are your melees, right? And then here's the enemy melees, and then we have like the ranged champions. So like the ranged champions will be shooting at the melees, right? And the melees will also be hitting the melees. So that means that the ranged units don't take any random damage, like from other minions. So that's why going for the ranged minions is really great, because you can get them basically to one hit, and then your AD carry can just last hit them at his leisure. So it's very easy for your AD carry while doing the pushing, hitting the melees, etc. Can just turn, okay, this is one last hit, boom, get that one, boom, move to the next one. It's really important that while you're pushing, you're just not missing gold on it, because it's such a terrible scenario for you to run into, and we want to actively avoid that as much as possible. So this is kind of like the technique that is going on. So if you find yourself, if you are resetting and you look at a wave and go, ooh, that was a really bad wave, you're probably running into this problem, which is you're not pushing waves fully in, which ties back to it's 2 waves if it's on your side, it's 1 wave if it's on their side, but you need to make sure that you're helping the whole time. Use your spells on the whole wave, AoE from the start once they clump up, and make sure that we are, if you just only have single target, right, maybe, you're a Nami or you're not a Zyra in that sense, you don't have a lot of AoE, just hit the ranged minions and make them one last hittable so your AD carry can get that hit in. So tying into that, which is a really, really important thing that I see actually pretty problematic, and it's actually very common when I see people play poke supports. So this is mostly predicated to poke supports, not as much on melee supports, which is hitting the turret to make gold from plates. So often I see a lot of people in lower elo where they push the wave in, and they just walk away from the turret, and they don't make any plates. This is most commonly on champions like Zyra, Lux, but I've seen it pretty much on all the ranged champions in general. Since ranged champions aren't the greatest roamers in a lot of ways, we want to make sure that we are generating our pressure in different ways. So when you get pushed, you want to be pressuring the turret, because this just makes you a lot of extra gold. Plus, when people are going for last hits, they're more vulnerable to being harassed. So, main thing that I see pretty commonly is we want to make sure that we are hitting these turrets to make gold. Now, when it comes to that, it comes to a couple of things, which I'm sure a lot of people have. Or questions, which is like, okay, I want to pressure the turret, but I don't know where the jungler is, or, I'm not really sure how to pressure the turret, or my AD carry doesn't walk up with me, right? These are all like things that are pretty commonly talked about when it comes to this circumstance. So pinging on your way to hit turret will usually get your ADC with you. So that is the first thing. Pinging on your way to hit the turret will usually get your AD carry with you. Next is identifying how big your wave is. So for example, right, if you have a wave that starts building here on your side, so let's just say you're the red side for right now, you have a wave that's starting to build here, then you probably have a huge amount of minions that are coming in here, right? You have more than one wave. You're probably going to have about 2 or 2.5 waves by the time it gets here. When those big waves crash, you actually just have a lot more time to actually harass under the turret. This is why I usually recommend not blowing out a wave when it gets into the middle a lot of time if you're winning, and just building 2 waves. The bigger the wave, the better. Because, you know, it just gives you a lot more... The bigger the wave, the better. It just gives you a lot more time to work on the turret. You know, hit the turret, auto attack it, etc. So let's talk about pressuring the turret. So number one, obviously, we want to make sure that we're at least getting a ward somewhere on this location, because we're just going to use the example of your red side for right now. So we want to make sure that we're always maintaining at least a pretty decent ward and pressuring under the turret. So common things that I actually see are pretty big problems when it comes to pressuring under the turret. Number one is positioning. So, for example, identifying what is a threat and what you need to do and position around is really, really important. So, we're going to use the example of you're the S. So, if a player is walking out on this outside, a lot of times what I'll see is the support walk on the outside too. What you really want to do is you want to maneuver yourself away from the threat. So if there is like a tank champion, for example, we want to make sure that you're paying attention to wherever, like, let's just use Leona as an example. We want to pay attention to wherever Leona is. So if Leona is over here, we want to be on the outside here. If Leona is walking on this side, we want to be on this side. Basically what you're doing is you're trying to create as much space between you and the kill, the threatening target, so the Leona, for example, and make sure we're weaving in those auto attacks. Auto-attacking the turret the entire time will generate you a lot of extra plates, but it'll also make you a lot more gold in terms of your spell thieves. It's a really important skill to get used to doing. Obviously, it's very easy for you to die while doing this, which is why it's important for you to build this skill. Because if you're not doing this, then you're just dropping gold every time. If you just take all 5 plates and the First Blood turret, it turns out to be like... 600, it's like over 1,000 gold between you and your AD carry, the First Blood turret and all 5 plates if you can get it. So a lot of times I'll see people literally just not pressure at all, and it's definitely a skill set that a lot of people need to develop a lot better. This is mostly important, especially when like you're playing things like Zyra, because you know your build's just really expensive, so we need as much gold as possible. When it comes to pressuring under the actual turret, so now that we've met the circumstances of it, another thing I see as a common mistake is people will actually use their spells to harass the second they can harass somebody in the lane. But this is actually a mistake a lot of the times, because anytime you throw out spells to harass somebody, you take turret aggro, right? And so we don't want to take turret aggro. We want maximum uptime on the wave. So a couple of things to note about pressuring under the turret. Number one is that when they're going for melee minions, it's terrible to try and harass them. So everyone's seen this before where, okay, each of the X's is kind of a melee unit. So you kind of see where the AD carry can stand on the outside and just last hit. He's very tucked under his turret. He's hard to reach, etc. But a lot of people will try to walk up all the way here and throw spells at them. This is a no-no for a couple of things. Number one, obviously, we want uptime on the turret. So we don't want the turret hitting us, making us step back, making us go, forward. That's 2 to 3 auto attacks, usually minimum, that you're going to lose every time you do that. It's not worth doing. Number two is it's too hard to hit them, right? So they're actually just too deep into the turret. So a lot of times if you throw your spells from this location onto this person right here, then what'll happen is you leave yourself open to this. Remember the Leona that we were talking about before, and we want to have the distance on? A lot of times she'll have an easy time grabbing you. And then if you get CC'd at all, you'll just die under the turret. So those are the kind of 2 mistakes there. So next is really talking about when should we poke, right? I have this push, I have this pressure. What am I supposed to do with it? Number one, uptime on the turret. Want to get as many plates as possible. Number 2, though, is poking. So, ranged champions are pretty much what we want to do. So we'll just do these for the X's for the ranged champions. So as you can see right here, the AD carry has to usually walk a lot closer in order to get to the ranged champions, right? He's pulled out of the turret. He's untucked from the turret is usually what I describe. So I call this exit trading. So when you're kind of done with the wave, your wave's about to die, the ranged minions are usually your indicator for when like the wave is going to be basically dead. This is when you use your trade. This is when you dump all of your spells and you're scooting back at the same time, because you can no longer spend any of your time doing uptime on the turret. So because of that, we're going to then dump our spells, then scoot back. The player is untucked from the turret, so it's a lot easier for you to hit your harass, and also, you're done hitting the turret because your wave is practically depleted. And this is kind of how we pressure under the turret more frequently, more consistently. It's a skill set that takes a lot of time getting used to, but when you start doing it, it'll make all of the poke champions that you play much, much better. You'll be a lot stronger in a lot of situations, and we want to make sure that we're doing that as frequently as possible. So another thing to note too, so that is when we are pressuring under the turret. So we're going to tie a couple of other things to this. If you watch my stream at all, one thing that is happening a lot of times is when the wave is coming into the turret, ping on your way a lot. The reason why I do this is just so that I can get my jungler down here. My jungler to cover me, in case a gank is happening because I'm playing really aggressively. Or potentially if I've done a good job poking, then we can actually dive them. So that is also like a really important skill set. We're layering our pinging. So we've talked about how to layer, use our pings in lane phase. Okay, I want to go in for, I want to go in for a 2v2, or I want to go in for poke, etc. But this is actually the next layer, which is just pinging on your way when the enemy players are under the turret, especially if they're low on HP. This will usually draw your jungler to you. He'll either cover you so you can play aggressively, or you can potentially set up a dive. These are both great ways to basically convert huge, small leads into huge leads. So we want to make sure that we're turning our small advantages into big advantages as much as possible. And this is a tool that will allow us to kind of do that in a lot of ways, shapes, and forms. Now, I'm sure that a lot of people will go, okay, you covered the ranged champion scenarios for waves crashing, etc. But what do I do if I play tanks? So let's talk about what to do as a tank when you get pushed. So you have a couple of options. Number one is you can roam. But what do we do when we roam? Roaming middle is great always. You can get vision, clear vision, gank their mid lane, etc. So this is like the number one thing that you can actually do pretty consistently. Most people, I would tell you, that are pretty oblivious to what's going on the map. So a lot of times, if you just get, you get the push going, roaming is never a bad option to exercise. Next is you can do dragon. This isn't an option just related to the tank, but whenever you are getting the push, if you feel like you can't pressure the turret or whatever, pinging the dragon will do you a lot of good. Just snowballing your lead. If you get a dragon at 6 or 7 minutes, it just makes the game way easier for you to lock down and utilize your advantage earlier on. So, if you're not sure what else to do the dragon. Get those dragons in. You can reset if you're low on HP/mana. So anytime that you feel like you're just, low on HP, low on mana, maybe you just had a fight, you don't feel like you can kill anyone anymore, just take those resets. I see a lot of times it's pretty common for me to witness players who, clearly can't do anything in lane, and they just kind of run around in a circle because they're not sure if they should reset or not. Their AD carry might not be resetting at the same time. They're concerned they might die or something like that. Sometimes it's just better for you to reset. That way it unlocks you to kind of either run to mid lane and get a gank off there. You can potentially go to top lane, or you just get your resources back and then you can come back to lane and play aggressively again. And then the other one also is diving. So remember what we already said beforehand, which is we want to ping our teammate on the way. That way we can bring people down there. If you get someone under 50% HP and you're full life, you can probably dive them, even 2v2. I think a lot of people are really scared to dive people in general, and I know it works, it can go really bad in a lot of ways, but if you are playing a tanky champion that can roam, you've got Aftershock, etc., it's pretty easy actually for you to dive someone at 50% health. You kind of just let the wave crash, and then you initiate first, and you kill that player pretty much instantly. If you exercise this more frequently, you'll actually find yourself climbing a lot more often and converting your 2v2 wins a lot easier. diving is really, really overpowered, and it's something a lot of people just don't even know how to deal with when it happens to them. Like, they won't scoop back, they'll usually stay under the turret at low HP, etc. So making sure that you pressure / dive under the turret will be a great asset for you whenever you are playing tank champions. Leona and Alistar are definitely the ones that come to mind, but there are plenty of other champions that can do this. I don't feel like when I watch tank supports play the game that they exercise dives basically at all. And so because of that, adding this as a arsenal or tool to your tool belt will help you a ton in terms of snowballing your advantages when it comes to 2v2ing and potentially 2v3ing if you bring your teammates down there. So we want to make sure that we are utilizing our waves well. Waves are crashing, roam, look for wards, get those dragons. Maybe even you can dive them in a lot of ways. So making sure we're adding these tools to our tool belt as a melee champion will allow you to kind of just snowball the game significantly easier. Another thing that I see actually commonly, but we kind of covered this already with the conversation that Owo brought up, which is just make sure that you don't have new boards. So this, we don't like it. No thank you. If you can get wards out, we want wards here and here or here. We want as deep a wards as we can possibly get so that we can see people way earlier. I see it too often where players will do the new ward, I'm going to call it, and what will happen is they push up and then they just get ganked even though they have a ward down, but by the time they see the gank coming, they can't get out and they die. Very common thing that I see. It takes literally 2 or 3 extra seconds to get your ward all the way out here, and if you're already in a position where you can push out and move to this location, you can get it a little bit deeper. Actually, a common question that a lot of people have for me too is what happens if someone takes the brush before me? Because, we talked about it. We want the brush. We always want the brush as much as possible. But what happens if, let's just say the red guy is the enemy player, right? What happens if they take the brush first? What am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to deal with this? Now, there's a couple of things that you can do. You can fight for the brush just straight up. You can brute force and fight for the brush. But I usually don't recommend that. The secret art to taking the brushes back is actually in minion control. So remember what we talked about where the minions meet in the middle. But when a push is established, then the minions are starting to go in different locations, as you kind of see my line. If you establish push, then what happens is the AD carry steps back. And then if the AD carry steps back, then the support is exposed here, and they usually have to relinquish the brush control. So the secret art to taking the brush at level 1, especially, is, okay, this player's taking the brush from me. I don't know what the heck to do. This is the secret art. You take your character, and you walk to this side, as far away from the brush as possible. And then what you do is you hit the minions the whole time, and you ignore them. You don't even bother with the brush. By doing this, what'll happen is you'll have the wave here, but then you'll eventually start pushing it, which will force the support to give ground because the AD carry has relinquished pressure here, which then allows you to push again, and then you do it again. So you kind of see right here, this works effectively when you either A, know where the jungler is, or B, the first 3 waves. So like levels 1, 2, and 3, this is usually just completely fine because of the fact that, the jungler is usually jungling. Obviously, the drawback to this is you are closer to the river, so then you can get ganked a lot easier. But the thing is that, the first 2 waves or so, that's not really a possibility in the arsenal, so you could exercise this specially, secret tech for levels 1 and 2. But I see a lot of people just they lose control of the brush, and then what happens is they'll lose control of the brush right here, and then they'll just cede all pressure. So see how far back they are now. They're not really accessing the wave. They're getting, maybe harassed from the brush, etc. We don't want that. We want to hit level 2 as frequently as possible. So make sure you're moving out to this location, fighting for those waves. If you don't do this, then you'll run into a lot of problems where even in range versus range matchups where you just don't get to the brush first, you'll get run over pretty often. So yeah, if you can't get the brush standing on the outside of the area to get the brush, this will allow you to retake it. And then winding down is going to be a couple of other things, which is just consumables and summoners. So I see this commonly done as kind of a mistake, which is number 1 is using health potions. A lot of people don't tend to use their health potions to keep themselves topped off. So the way I want you to think about it is like this. If you're missing 200 HP, you should just use your health potion to get back that HP, because the higher your HP is, the harder it is for you to get all in, which then allows you to fight back and poke back. If you wait till you're under 50% health, potions don't magically do more healing the more health you're missing. So we want to make sure that we're using our health potions to keep topped off. because we ideally don't want to actually have potions up for when we all in, because usually when an all in occurs, ignite occurs, which then just reduces the value of your potions. Another thing to note that I want to tie into this is potions are the most powerful at level 1. The reason for this is because abilities just don't do as much damage, right? So we kind of already talked about it, but, you know, abilities don't do as much damage. So getting hit by an ability at level 1 and using your health potion is way easier to recover from than if the spell is level 2. So if the character is level 3 or above, then that spell is going to do, you know, 30, 50 more damage, and then the same spell that hit you beforehand now consumes so much more of your resources for your potions. This is why I usually recommend that most people try to learn how to lane where you at least use one of your potions before you're level 3. If you're not using a potion before level 3, you're usually making mistakes in the lane, as in you're not doing anything in the lane. You're being too passive. And so we want to always make sure that we're using our potions to top ourselves off. And obviously, as a fringe scenario, if you do have potions or consumables, use them in fights. See a lot of people go for all-ins or just like big trades in general, and they won't pop their potion till the end of the fight. But if they had popped their potion at the start of the fight, or during the fight themselves, then they would actually have been able to push a lot harder because they'd just be a lot healthier, and they would actually potentially be able to score a kill. This is really, really important, by the way, because I think a lot of people... we don't use their potions like nearly enough, or don't think about how they want to play the lane in tandem with their potions themselves. Because a lot of people will tend to sit on their potions for a long period of time and not even use them to top themselves off. This applies, by the way, also to any sustained support. So whenever you're missing health, you want to restore it pretty much as soon as possible. So like if you're playing a Nami, you're playing a Sona, etc., we want to make sure that we are trying to keep ourselves as topped off as possible with our healing spells so that we can continue to play aggressively. If you don't do this, then you'll just kind of get continuously poked, and it will be kind of a snowball effect that will continue to trample over yourself when it comes to being poked. And then next is just summoners. So I see this like pretty commonly with a lot of people when it comes to summoners. So most people are too stingy with their summoners. They just hold on to them for a long period of time. They don't really use them very often. They're kind of slow on the trigger when it comes to utilizing them. So this is what we want to do as a fundamental retool of what you think about your summoners. Summoners should pretty much always be used pretty early on in our fights. So first we're talking about exhaust. So exhaust early in fights, because you always want to exhaust early in fights because it can get spells. And if you get spells, the value of exhaust increases exponentially. And obviously, as you know, I'm sure everyone has played the game. When you run into someone, you start fighting them, most people use their spells pretty much instantly. They're kind of just instantaneously dumped into the fight because they want to put them on cooldown, bring them back off cooldown to continuously use them. And plus they do damage or have utility, etc. So making sure we use our exhaust early in a fight to get an HP advantage / stop incoming spells. So here are some logic problems people have with exhaust. Which is, I don't want to exhaust because I don't think we can kill. So this is actually a pretty common problem that a lot of people have with the spell exhaust, which is that I don't think we can kill them, so I'm not going to use exhaust. Exhaust should actually be used in all in angles whenever you want to like create pressure on your lane, or if they engage on you. So a common one is like, let's say you're playing Nami against Leona. Leona Zenith Blades on you or your AD carry. You should just immediately dump exhaust, even if you're not going to get any summoners out of your opponent, because we want to stop all that incoming damage. We want to keep ourselves topped off. This is a principle that a lot of people don't really understand, which is why it's really important for, you know, me to explain it to you. In the same way that I told you, you want to use health potions to keep yourself topped off, right? More HP just means you can play more aggressively, which means that you can continuously put pressure on, generate gold, right? Have control of the lane. This also applies. Exhausting when it comes to, you know, someone all-inning you, all-inning your AD carry, or if, you know, just someone's out of position and you want to leverage a slow and start beating the crap out of them. Don't use exhaust to try to score a kill. Use exhaust to stop incoming damage and get an HP lead. It's always important to do this, because a lot of times what people think is they want to exhaust but get summoners in trade with it. And yes, that's always great, right? Don't get me wrong. But exhaust doesn't work like ignite. Exhaust won't actually stop the healing from heal in terms of it. So trading is great and ideal for the summoner cooldowns, but it's not actually that important in terms of having them occur at the same time. If you use exhaust and the player doesn't use heal and he's now 100 HP, but you use exhaust, that's an advantageous scenario that allows you to then continuously play aggressively. So we want to make sure that we're using our exhaust early in fights. That way we can get HP advantages and stop incoming spells. A lot of people are way too greedy for their exhaust. Sometimes I literally see them use exhaust when players are 100, 200 life. Want to use it preemptively. Don't use it at the end of fights, because we want to catch all those spells and get an HP advantage. And then finally, to conclude for our early game stuff, is Ignite. A lot of times when you play all-in champions, people want to save their Ignite way too much. You should always use your Ignite pretty much anytime it looks like it's a good all-in. So if you're playing Alistar, Leona, Nautilus, etc., you go in, you start CCing. If your AD carry is hitting that player, you need to dump Ignite immediately. And the reason for that is by dumping Ignite immediately, you create pressure on your opponent to pull back, to use summoners, to use their blinks, etc. And by doing this, it means that they won't do nearly as much return damage, because every time you all in should be an opportunity for you to try to kill somebody. And the longer and greedier they are with their summoners, the more often you'll be able to, flash on them when your spell's back up, or, flash chase them, etc. And we always want to use our Ignite like pretty much immediately. If your AD carry can hit on your CC, always dump it. Same thing applies. If, for whatever reason you don't get their summoner heal, but they're like sub 100 HP or whatever, it's just fine. It's not a big deal. I think a lot of times people treat their combat summoners like these big ticket spells where like they need to get a kill or like huge summons advantage for it, and a lot of times they're just too greedy with it. Whereas really a lot of times what happens is you'll have this scenario where you Ignite. Let's just say he doesn't use heal or whatever, but like by the time he resets, gets HP, etc., there's 80 seconds off your Ignite already. Ignite and exhaust are relatively short cooldowns comparatively to summoner heal and flash, so don't be afraid to just use them to get huge advantages in your lane. These combat summoners are tools for you to get edges in your lane, and a lot of times people just don't get edges or value out of it just because they're too greedy with it. And also by igniting relatively early, not only do you mitigate early heals, but you also stop incoming other things, like if they use potions, if they use biscuits, if there's healing in their lane, etc. You can mitigate all of that too. So it actually compiles and adds extra damage and value to the Ignite itself. And yeah, I mean, that pretty much concludes kind of like our first 10 minutes of laning phase stuff and mistakes that I see commonly done by people. Do you guys have any questions or things you'd like me to go over again, or maybe you have ideas that maybe I didn't hit on that you're curious about or want to add to the list?
Now, obviously, if you're facing a Kayn or a Nocturne, do you want to sit on I usually bring exhaust if one of those two guys is in the game. Should I sit on it? Should I just keep it in the back? Not use it.
Well, I mean, if you're laning and you're fighting and you have an opportunity to use exhaust, you should just use the exhaust for your laning phase stuff. Like, if a Leona jumps in and you have exhaust and they're on your AD carry, you should dump your exhaust on their enemy AD carry and stop the incoming damage. If you tunnel too hard on just like, oh, exhaust is only for the Kayn or Nocturne, you'll probably lose a lot of opportunities to use it in your actual lane. Obviously, as you get later into the game, which will be kind of our next talking point for the next class, if there's a blue Kayn or a Nocturne or whatever, and you're 15 minutes in and you're no longer laning, right? You're just like chilling mid, clearing waves, setting up for team fights, etc. Then yeah, you can totally hold your exhaust for those players that are coming in, and in fact, honestly, that's ideal, especially if they're super fed. But in laning phase, if you see an opportunity where exhaust is going to be good, you should just use it on those players. If you're just holding on to it the whole time, I think you'll miss a lot of opportunities to get good value out of your exhaust just from 2v2ing. Okie dokie. Then yeah, that will be actually it for this. I will be posting this in the masterclass thing so you can reference it, and then I'll be uploading this a little bit later. Thanks for coming out, guys. Really appreciate it, and I'll see you later.